My guest at this time is a prolific voice actor in games and anime. You may have heard his voice in games like Nier Automata, Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes, Granblue Fantasy Versus, or just about any time you autoplay on Netflix in the anime section. His latest project is up in the air as the video game voice actors have come to the table ready to strike. We're going to talk about that right now. Welcome to the show, Kyle McCarley.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for having on, man. Let's talk about this strike and what's going on, because cursory research, 2016, the voice actors went on strike initially. They stopped working for about a year, and I think it was the longest strike
Just
in
shy
SAG-AFTRA.
of a year. Yes, longest strike in either SAG or AFTRA's history, and then obviously in the very short history of the merged SAG-AFTRA. I think one of the longest strikes in any union's history. I'm not totally sure about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was really long. It was a
who
really long
better
strike.
than struggling actors to know how to not work for over a year? I mean, I think that's probably for the best.
Absolutely.
So with that, like, I know some of the stuff that's on stakes now had talked about then, and it's been kind of a refusal to make adjustments. It's kind of the other side's attempt to just kind of keep pushing back.
It's a very different animal this time around than it was in 2016,
okay.
actually. Yeah.
So is the sequel better than the original?
Well, so first off, I should specify we are not on strike at this moment in time. We voted in massive numbers and overwhelmingly in favor of strike authorization. And what that means is that we gave our negotiating committee, we being the members, the SAG-AFTRA membership, gave the interactive negotiating committee the power to call a strike if they deem that it is necessary. I had, candidly, every expectation for the interactive committee to come out of the negotiations that just ended on Thursday night with, we are on strike. And what they came out of those negotiations with was, we have ended our negotiations for the week without a deal. The current deal remains in effect. We'll be back at the table. I think they said on the 10th or 11th of October.
Got it. So cliffhanger ending, ready for part two.
Yeah. As somebody who is not on that negotiating committee and knows no information beyond that official statement,
right.
My hypothesis is the fact that the WGA just got their deal with the AMPTP, the fact that the AMPTP is coming back to the table with SAG-AFTRA to talk about the TV theatrical contract, the big CBA that all of SAG-AFTRA's contracts point to. So the fact that that is happening right now, I think made both sides of the interactive negotiations go, you know what? Let's wait and see what comes of that, and then we'll come back to the table. Which is great, honestly.
Oh, for sure. And it shows that movement is being made. There's an element of this that feels kind of, you having worked in anime, understand kind of the Dragon Ball Z approach of just where a fight will last at least 6 episodes. It's kind of a similar environment. Let's talk about. I think before we get into what you guys are fighting against, I want a little clarification, because as someone on the outside looking in, I hear that WGA just kind of wrapped up their strike. SAG-AFTRA still on strike with the on the film and television side. This is technically a separate SAG-AFTRA strike. This is not.
Yeah, it's a completely different contract. It's different. Different set of negotiating partners, different employers, but there is some overlap.
Right.
In the sense,
because there's overlap
that,
in the people involved, but also it's not like this is a subdivision of SAG-AFTRA that you guys are. It's not that you are. Is it that the voice actors specifically are a separate thing, or?
No, so our union is very big. SAG-AFTRA is a very big union. They represent a whole lot of different types of performers. They represent background actors. They represent broadcasters, like people who divulge the news to you on CNN. They represent sports broadcasters and I think even like radio personalities. There's a whole lot of completely different niches of the entertainment and information industry that SAG-AFTRA represents. And all of those different areas have their own contracts. And a lot of them have completely different employers that those contracts are negotiated with than the TV theatrical contract that everybody thinks of when they think of actors and the actors union. So there's a whole lot of there's all of those different things. So when we called the strike on TV theatrical, it didn't apply to the broadcasters, to the late night hosts. Didn't apply to video games. It didn't apply to dubbing, but that was an exception that our negotiating committee very intelligently put in, because dubbing is a completely different animal, I think, even though it is a subset of the TV theatrical contract in that case.
Wow.
Anyway,
this is why you get the lawyers in on this.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that the metaphor that a friend of mine likes to bring out is if you think of a dam that holds up a big old river. The big dam is our TV theatrical contract, and the big river is all of that work that flows through there. And then there are all these other little smaller rivers that are running alongside that one, and there'll be some little tributaries that'll branch off of the big TV theatrical river and kind of feed in before the dam of the interactive contract shows up a little bit further down. So it's because we will take the interactive committee will take some notes from the TV theatrical committee's negotiations to help inform them and to help influence the negotiations. But it is a completely separate contract. And it is a completely separate set of employers, because it's interactive. It's wild. We're negotiating with I think it's 9 companies are on the interactive the employers side of things that are negotiating. I can't remember.
So I have it here. Let me know if this is the list that sounds right. It's the Activision, Blind Light, Disney, EA, Epic Games, Formosa, Insomniac, Take-Two, VoiceWorks, and WB.
Yeah. So right there within that very small list of companies, because there are a lot of other companies that work in video games and employ SAG-AFTRA actors, but those companies are the ones that we negotiate our contract with. Other companies might work through those companies to hire SAG-AFTRA actors, or they might just say, hey, we'll take whatever contract exists to hire SAG-AFTRA actors.
Got it. So it's not just that
necessarily negotiating things.
It's not just these are the ones you're not working with. It's or you're striking against. It's these are the ones at the table for the moment, but they're
the ones at the table. And just within that small list, there's 3 different types of employers. Insomniac is a game developer. So they make those games, and they will come directly to us as the developer and hire SAG-AFTRA actors to work on their games. Activision and EA, just as an example, or Warner Brothers or Disney, those guys are game publishers. So I mean, some of them have their own in-house development teams, but most of the games that they put out, they are hiring they're either picking up a license from somebody who already made a game, or they are just acting as the distributor, and they've subcontracted a studio that's making the game for them. And
right,
they
but
if
a producer,
as a
they're
publisher.
Handling a lot of that business and getting you guys on. Yeah.
And then the third type that's in that same list of negotiating partners is recording studios. Formosa and Blind Light are recording studios that are just studios for hire that any game developer or publisher can come to and say, hey, we'd like you to make our game, record the dialogue for our game for us. And then they can decide if they want to go through, they're supposed to use their union signatory status and use us as, but sometimes they do what's called double breasting, where they'll work non-union on things. So we have 3 completely different sets of negotiating partners, all in the room on the same side of the table. which really does complicate things. But
so they all have their own sets of rules, They
all have their own things that they're looking for. I mean, it's the same kind of stuff that the TV theatrical negotiations have been dealing with, where they're dealing with tech companies that are getting into the entertainment business at the same time as they're dealing with the old school film and TV production houses. It's that same kind of juggling of like, how are you guys able to actually bargain with us when you don't want the same things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When one end of the spectrum is Mark Zuckerberg and the other end of the spectrum is Harvey Weinstein, you feel like it's a really fucked up spectrum.
Right. But I did want to touch on something because you started to allude to this. In the event that a strike is called, we would gosh, I have to be very careful about the way that I word this because this was very confusing in 2016, and I want to be very clear. If an interactive strike is called, it will specifically be applied to those 9 negotiating, or what was it? Was it 9, 7, whatever it is?
Yeah, I can count it, but I think that sounds about right.
Those companies are the ones that we would be striking against specifically. Anybody else, and in fact, even those companies themselves, I believe, would have the option to come to us outside of negotiations and sign what's called an interim agreement. Those interim agreements would essentially be like the existing interactive agreement with the addendums of here's all the stuff that we are asking for currently in negotiations that the other side has been unwilling to give us. If you
so it's
are
almost
willing
like a
to give
reverse
us
scab.
It's specifically saying if you will agree to give us everything we are asking for, we are not going to strike you. We will absolutely come and work for you.
Interesting.
So
okay.
that's what an interim agreement is, and it's an invaluable tool during a SAG-AFTRA strike.
Right. It's a way to whittle at the armor, so to speak, because if you get a Take-Two to give in a little bit, and you get this person to give in a little bit, it almost seems like you end up with a smaller team.
If you think about it, like Sony is not one of our negotiating partners. Or
that's a
Microsoft is not one of our negotiating partners. They have to go through a Formosa or a Blind Light or something like that as it is right now. So they could easily just go, well, what if we agree to sign an interim agreement and we can still record it at Formosa or Blind Light if we want to, or we could take it to somebody who's a little more actor friendly. I don't know. Like, we could go wherever we want. So it's a way for us to kind of help put the pressure on these companies that wouldn't, just theoretically. I don't know where things are going to land. We may never go on strike. We may never go on strike here.
You bring up the Microsoft thing is interesting because of one of the people on here is Activision. And of course, Microsoft has been in this big war trying to buy Activision Blizzard for the longest time. So it's funny how, like, you're right, Microsoft is not listed on there, but someone they've been trying to buy for a while is. And I wouldn't be surprised at what point is it where it'd be interesting to see in the next couple of years if this happens again, where the various holding companies, Embracer Group, that is owns 150.
It's already a different and I believe shorter list of negotiating partners than it was in 2016. So
fair.
things change pretty quickly. Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about the key issues. So what is on the table this time around? What are the main things that you guys are balking against?
So the number one issue, far and away, is artificial intelligence.
No.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the year of our Lord 2023? No.
Basically, what to my understanding of what the negotiating committee is trying to get the other side of the table to agree to is you will only use anything that you have us record for you to train. Actually, I think it's specifically like you can't use it to train any artificial intelligence models. You will only use a model that you create off of our voice or our likeness for something with a negotiation with SAG-AFTRA, not just the individual performer, but with SAG-AFTRA on a project, on a per project and per role basis. You have to negotiate the terms of that usage. It has to be limited to just that project, and there has to be some compensation involved as well as informed consent on all of that. And there seems to be a lot of pushback on that. There's kind of this attitude in the tech world where, well, you already did it for us. Now it's ours to do with what we will. And there have to be usage parameters on everything that we do as performers. So that's a big, like, we are digging our heels in the sand on that one for sure. We will not budge on those specific asks for artificial intelligence protections. That's number one for sure. Number two is inflation-adjusted wage increases, which is also a big issue in the TV theatrical negotiations that are that have led to the strike that is still currently ongoing, but hopefully potentially going to be resolved within the next week. I don't know.
Fingers crossed.
Back at the table on Monday. So we'll see. Or I guess by the time this
literally this will air
today.
A good chance maybe after.
Maybe there's already a deal done. Who knows?
We'll see how up to date this is.
Right. Yeah. Maybe there's already a deal. Who knows? I doubt it'll happen.
That's
in
why.
a day,
If we waited a week, I'm not even sure it'd be worth having this conversation.
Exactly.
So we're having it now.
The wages, I don't know if I have specific percentage values anymore. I know at one point we were asking for 11% in the first year, and then I think it was 5% in the second and third years. And I don't know if that's come down at all for what we're asking for or not. But I know it's inflation in mind, and I'm sure it's going to be. We're going to end up pointing to wherever we land with the AMPTP, assuming that
is
gets
the
resolved.
11 just because of how big of a jump that is the 11 a bit of like a retroactive jump because there hasn't been much inflation previously?
It's based on how gross inflation has hit our economy in America over the past 3 years.
Wow.
Because since 2020, inflation has been about 11%. It's been wild.
Fucking A.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So those are the big two, and then there's also we want some more safety provisions for our performance capture or motion capture performers. We want to have an on-set trained medic, not just somebody with a first aid kit, which is what last I heard what they were offering.
Really? Really?
Yeah. We want them to have the guaranteed, our voiceover performers like myself, we are guaranteed a 5-minute break every hour, or it can be prorated to be 10 minutes every 2 hours or something like that. There are no breaks guaranteed for motion capture, performance capture performers in our current contract. We want to get them the same breaks that we get as voiceover performers. And what else? And we want to get codified in the contract vocal stress provision that guarantees that if it's going to be a vocally stressful session, it cannot be any longer than 2 hours. That has become pretty industry. It's become that was a big tentpole issue during the 2016 strike, and it was the one issue that we did not get as far as I know, out of at the end of that strike. But what we did get was a lot of education happening for our employers. And as a result, the culture has changed to the point where to work longer than 2 hours on something vocally stressful is pretty much unheard of anyway. So for them to not be willing to codify that in the agreement feels a little weird. But
so those last couple feel a bit like no-brainers, right? It's like, you don't want somebody getting injured in your mocap room. You don't want someone screaming on the top of their lungs in losing their voice. You can never bring them back if you make a franchise.
Right.
Those make sense. Let's kind of dive into those first two, which are obviously where the rich people step in and be like, no, because I paid for this. AI obviously being the big topic in general. We're seeing it everywhere. I remember you had posted not too long ago almost a bit of a warning of people about people not putting in protections in their contract against AI. Or have you seen like people try to slide in, even on contracts of your own, or just like, we own your voice, can use it for any DALL-E project we wish moving forward?
There has been some stuff showing up in contracts that I think was there already. It's just language that takes on a new meaning in light of current technology that says we reserve the right to simulate your voice, which, like, I think that's terminology that's been around for ages that generally means we have the right to get somebody to impersonate you. Or we have the right to manipulate what you record for us to make it sound a little different, or something like that.
Right. It's like hiring Dan Castellaneta to play Genie in the second Aladdin. It's like
yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's that kind of stuff that like they work in that type of language all the time. But because of the verbiage that's used to assert those rights, it feels a lot like it could be trying to assert artificial intelligence rights as well. And SAG-AFTRA's official stance is you cannot assert those rights without negotiating with us first. That is a mandatory subject of bargaining. And our lawyers feel very confident that if we ever had to take it to court, we would win that fight in terms of that being a mandatory subject of bargaining.
So it's not even about taking it out of the contracts. It's just about not having it in. Having it in on a case-by-case basis if talked to with SAG-AFTRA and the individual.
We know that they want to be able to use this technology, especially in video games. They're really eager to be able to try and, like, there's tech demos coming out of like game worlds where you as the player can go talk to the non-player characters that you're interacting with, and artificial intelligence generates their responses so that it feels like an actual conversation that you're having with somebody. And yeah, that's really cool technology. And I, as somebody who plays a lot of video games, yeah, I kind of want to play a game like that. But I want to make sure that myself and my fellow performers aren't being exploited to the point where we are obsolete and we're not going to be making any money anymore when they're using our voices to generate those performances or our faces or whatever. So that's why we want these protections in place, because we don't want them asserting rights that we personally believe they don't have at the moment, and we want to make sure that we get it in the contract now before it's too late to assert it, because in another 3 years this technology is going to have just exploded.
For sure. Given how AI now is NFTs 2 years ago, which in turn was crypto 4 years ago, right. Like, I'm sure as you've talked about this online and been vocal about this online, you've had your share of people who push back. We'll say the nicest thing, especially in some of the more dead bird carcass portions of the social media. What are like?
It is a very small but vocal minority. Yes.
What are those pushbacks? And I mean, in turn, what, like, I'd say, like, using this as another platform once again. To what are people saying that, like, are disagreeing with you, and, like, what are the holes in their logic?
I think the big thing is that they feel like it's making art more accessible for people who don't have the money to hire professionals. But I feel like you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot as you say that. Like, if you don't have the money to hire professional artists. Right. Then are you really, and if you don't have the creativity to be the professional artist yourself, like, what art are you really creating there? Yeah,
it's like that using Midjourney for your D&D character portrait in D&D Beyond is different than using Midjourney for, say, your t-shirt company.
Yeah, exactly. And I think another like there's a whole nother topic of conversation that we need legislation really bad to help protect against this, where fans are taking stuff that they are finding like in games or movies, TV, cartoon shows, whatever, and they are feeding that into 11 Labs where they can just click a box that says, yeah, I own this, with no sort of supporting evidence. And then they can create their own little AI model of whatever they want and go have it sing a song in a character's voice and post it on YouTube. And nobody can do anything to stop them right now with because there's no legislation because it's brand new technology. We really need help with that.
That's
there
crazy.
Is thankfully, public sentiment in general really doesn't look favorably upon people who do that stuff right now, because people like myself within the industry have been very vocal about, hey, guys, yes, legally you're not doing anything wrong, but morally you are really upsetting people, the real live human beings whose likenesses you are like. It doesn't feel any more like identity theft than that to me.
Right. Also, it's like, I don't know, if you're a fan of this person enough that you're doing something like this, you'd think the person coming out being like, hey, I don't like you're doing this, could possibly shame them into hiding.
Exactly.
But
now there is still a small vocal minority who's like, screw those people. Let's let this happen. Like, let's make these characters say dick and fart jokes or whatever that they can't say. Yeah.
It's all the people who still wish Newgrounds was around, so it's fine.
There's definitely like major consequences that could come of that being left unchecked, but specifically what we're talking about when it comes to a potential interactive strike, it's the work side of things, and it feels a little less nefarious there to me, or a little less potentially inadvertently nefarious than it is with fans doing stuff. But it is still like it's a job security issue for sure, and what is our union doing if not trying to protect our jobs? So
1,000%.
Yeah, that's why it's such a big issue for sure.
So the other side of this coin is the wage increase and making sure that's gone up. Was that an issue in the 2016 strike as well?
I mean,
or
every contract negotiation, that is always going to be an issue.
I guess
it's
it makes
always
sense.
going to be one.
Yeah.
Workers are always going to be asking for more money than the employers are willing to give, and at the end of the day, at some point we will meet somewhere in between those 2 points. It's just a matter of what's it going to take to get to that point, and how low can we afford to go, and how high do they feel like they can afford to come up to meet us.
I mean, that said, like, haven't the CEOs been through enough, man? Haven't they had enough heartbreak? You know, it's so hard being them, having to let go the bottom because they made mistakes. Like, can't we go easy on them?
I will say, like, AI is obviously also a subject of discussion with the TV theatrical contract for SAG-AFTRA, just as it was a discussion for the WGA. But I think the wage increase was like kind of the big obstacle, because if the WGA hadn't gotten their deal, and if we weren't, presumably going to be getting our deal with the AMPTP very soon, I think that would have been a major roadblock, because there was no way that our interactive committee was going to settle for any less of a wage increase than what our TV theatrical negotiating committee was asking for from the AMPTP, because it would have been cutting our legs out from under ourselves. And by the same token, our bargaining partner, Warner Brothers and Disney, are on both on the other side of the table on both of those issues. So they weren't going to give us what we were asking for in interactive if they weren't willing to give it to us in TV theatrical. So the fact that roadblock seems to be getting out of the way makes me much more optimistic about an interactive contract being settled sooner rather than later.
That's good. That's good to hear. As you mentioned, as of recording, the theatrical has not wrapped yet. It sounds like that's kind of first on the docket before the video game voice actors.
Really seems to me, it seems to me like the only reason we are not on strike at this moment is because both sides agreed to just say, let's see what happens with when you guys go back to the table with the AMPTP, and then we'll reconvene. So.
Yeah, I honestly, it's not unlike a video game company to put something on pause until the other bigger games come out and then see how their game does.
Yeah. I just wanted to, like, knowing some of the people on the interactive negotiating committee, as fleetingly familiar as I am with some of those people, I feel like they would not have agreed to table the discussion if meaningful progress hadn't been made. Just, with the caveat of, like, obviously both sides are saying, all right, let's just hold off. Let's see what happens. And then we'll talk about this again.
Yeah. I don't know if we're in a fight until mommy and daddy are in a fight.
I think if they hadn't, if the negotiating partners had not agreed to come part of the way to us in the negotiations that just ended on Thursday, we'd be on strike right now. I think so. I think some progress must have been made in those discussions.
Right. I mean, people are willing to talk to see what other people are doing before they make their own move.
Right. Exactly.
It feels like the likelihood in general of a strike may be dying down. Either way, depending on one way or another, it kind of signals to the individual teams which direction they're taking.
A week ago, it felt like it was a foregone conclusion, and now it feels like it's still very likely that we will go on strike, but it is far less likely now, I think, than it was. So
what is then?
Fingers crossed.
At this point, in your eyes, what does a strike look like in the industry? So physically, I know what a strike looks like. You walk outside and I'm seeing people march around with signs. And I know that means that you guys aren't working. Do games, and does the games industry go on pause in the same way Hollywood does?
Okay. So this I'm going to take us back to 2016 here to talk about this, because the reason that strike took so long to be resolved, I think, is it's twofold. First, games take forever to be made. So the industry does not feel the effects of a strike for 3 years because it takes that long for production to finally, like, for us to finally actually, like, gum up the works on production by not going into work. That's the first part. The second part is I don't know who's responsible for this clause in our interactive agreement. Whoever it is, they're not my friend. There is a clause in our interactive agreement that does not exist in any other SAG-AFTRA contract that says if you, as a producer, have already signed your project to the agreement, then we cannot call a strike on that project. So, in 2016, there was a whole lot of confusion because we were striking 11 specific companies. But any project that those 11 specific companies had already signed when the strike was called, we were still allowed to work on. And by official messaging, that's what we were getting, was that wording, which just confused so many actors like myself. I wasn't even a union member yet, so I was going, all right, so I can't work for those companies, but I'm still not a union member. I can work non-union. I just don't want to work non-union for them. But I can work union. I just got to make sure that if I'm working union, it's either not for them or it's in the little database that says that they signed the thing before we called the strike. Okay, yeah.
So it's kind of like being grandfathered into not being struck against.
Yeah. Lots and lots of confusion there. That's the reason that strike took so long. And now, take us to present day. If a strike gets called today, or well, not today, but in a couple of weeks, then I think obviously, unless our wonderful lawyers have figured out a way out of that stupid clause in our contract, which I don't think they have, but maybe they have. I think what we're going to have is a whole lot of, yes, that is the official messaging. However, we would like to remind all of our performers who work in video games that if you are contracted as a day player, you are under no contractual obligation to report to work for any project. So you, as an individual, you can withhold your services for a non-struck project, so if it'll help apply some pressure. So
interesting.
I think,
it's not like you can still work for these companies that have projects that started
by
before
the official rules. Yeah, by the official rules of the strike, we cannot tell you that you can't work for these projects.
But if you come down with a case of the I don't give a fuck flu, then you can just not show up, and
you are
that's
under
also
no
okay.
contractual obligation. Yeah, you are under no contractual obligation to report to work for anything that hasn't contracted you to work.
Wow.
So, and 99% of video game work is day player work. We sign the paperwork the day of, or sometimes a week later. So,
oh wow, okay,
yeah. So it's there's definitely room for individual performers to help try and apply some pressure to those companies if they really hold out on us. There's also our interactive committee has learned a lot since 2016, and they've learned a lot from the TV theatrical strike as well. Interim agreements are going to be readily available if a strike is called, so that all those other employers that want to work with us and give us everything we're asking for will be able to really quickly. So I think, will the whole industry slow down? No. And fans probably wouldn't notice much of a change to anything for a while. There might be a few projects, depending on how long a strike would take. There might be a few more projects that have non-union casts that aren't as strong as they would otherwise be, just because, especially the issues this time around compared to 2016 are so much more universally supported by performers. I think employers are going to have a lot harder time finding actors who are willing or confused enough to cross the picket line this time around compared to 2016.
Right. That's great. I also think of something like so I think recently, and I think I'm even making a joke about this in my opening monologue of this episode, that Cameron Monaghan stated something about the next Star Wars Jedi game. So obviously those talks are already happened, even though Star Wars Jedi Survivor just came out earlier this year. So it's possible that's in contract that like the strike could come and go, and if that starts,
and that project never skips a beat. Yeah.
That's crazy to think about that. So there really is, like, it's not like things shut down in the same way.
No, not even close to the same way. I do believe there will be some sort of promotion embargo, if that's possible, on completed projects and stuff that is still in the works, because that's stuff that's not in the contract usually.
So like Jeff Keighley in the Game Awards is like fucked if this happens.
I don't know. It really, like, I can't. It's hard for me to predict what strike rules will be before a strike is called. But I mean, course, obviously, coming off of a TV theatrical, we're still in a TV theatrical strike. Those rules are obviously going to be influential. I don't think they'll be exactly the same, but they'll be taking cues from that if it happens.
Holy shit. Well, is there anything, and obviously it's probably difficult being on the outside looking in, the fans can do to support should a strike come? Like, obviously there are going to be some who are the naysayers who are fighting for the rights of AI, as if this was...
They will be a very, very. You won't even hear from them, honestly, compared to how many people are going to be so supportive of. Like, we are having a hot labor summer, or coming off of a hot labor summer.
It's beautiful. It's sexy. I'll get the pool party ready.
Yeah.
But what can the fans who do want to help and want to kind of lend their support? What can they do?
I would say I'm certain that there will be no call for any sort of a boycott of any kind. But I will say that if you're a streamer, which I know a lot of people stream video games, I am certain that there will be. I'm certain because they've told me as much that the interactive committee will have guidelines out for streamers who are not SAG-AFTRA members and not aspiring SAG-AFTRA members, just people who stream video games on the internet. Guidelines for streamers who want to be supportive of our efforts. Just basically saying, hey, here's stuff that you maybe want to avoid streaming right now to help us, like, kind of dig in and against the people that are holding out against us. So if there's a strike, that's one thing that you could look for. Obviously, if you've got some spare money in the bank account, donations to the Entertainment Community Fund or the SAG-AFTRA Foundation go a long, long way to help performers who are out of work, especially as a result of labor disputes. I mean, those funds are around all the time, but they are working overtime when we're in a strike. So
perfect. I'll throw links to those down below as well to make sure anyone watching can click on that.
And then obviously, I'm sure there's going to be a hashtag or two when the time comes. So be vocal on the internet and just try and, like, express your support. I know that feels like such a small, meaningless thing, but it does mean something. It really does.
Change your profile picture to a pixelated blob in solidarity for all the video game voice actors out there on strike.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Kyle, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much for hopping on. Before you disappear into the night, where can people find you? Do you have anything you're working on that you can share before all hell breaks loose? That you can talk about?
Yeah, that's the thing, because everything's always under NDA. I was in Starfield, just came out, so if you're playing that, you can find me somewhere in there. Anime. Oh, there's a thing coming to Netflix. Keep your eyes peeled for that. And that's the most I can say. That's honestly more than I can say about that. But who's going to stop me?
Honestly, I mentioned before, but literally, if you hit randomize, whatever auto plays, on the number of times I've heard this man's voice just scrumming through, my wife hears me go, "Oh shit, that's Kyle." It's just like, it's you'll find him.
And you can find me on social media generally is at Kyle McCarley. You can also, if you're into board games, I do a show called The Board and Barrel. It's BNB Tabletop on both Twitch and YouTube are the two big platforms for us there. So,
it's an absolute blast. Check them out live because you get to interact with them. It's a ton of fun. Kyle, thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.